get back?
She hasn't responded yet, but I expect that she will. So
Okay.
when
Okay.
we get to it, we can definitely just kind of see if she's out there.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, let's see. Okay. Welcome everyone that is joining. We're going to give it just a couple minutes and then get started. Oh, sharing is paused. Please bring your shared window to the front. Not sure what that means. Let's see. Welcome everyone that's joined so far. We're just going to give it a couple minutes and then we'll get started. All right, let's see. And Melina will be joining us, guest appearance. Nice. Thanks, Melina.
Terrific. Hey, Melina.
I'm not sure if she's logged in quite yet, but she'll be here.
Okay. All right.
And I think we will get started. I don't want to start too late. So for everyone that's here, welcome and a big hello. My name is Kelly Cobb, and I'm the VP of Giving at Bombas. My pronouns are she, her. I'm so glad to be able to host this discussion tonight around the topic of relational poverty, families, and the experience of homelessness. This is the 8th conversation we've hosted as part of our ongoing speaker series, and we'll continue to host one every month, digging into the many topics that intersect with homelessness. So we hope you'll keep coming back to learn with us. And if you're interested in catching up on some of our previous topics, the Bombas YouTube channel has a playlist of all of the recordings. And a recording of tonight's conversation will be made available tomorrow. For anyone that wasn't able to join, we'll also send that out in an email follow-up so that if you want to share it, you can. So tonight, I'm so pleased to be joined by two folks from Miracle Messages. Miracle Messages is an organization, a Bombas giving partner, who helps unhoused neighbors rebuild their social support systems, primarily through family reunifications, a phone-based buddy system, and direct cash transfers. Their services are available everywhere, which is incredible. Several members of the Bombas team have been consistently volunteering to help as digital detectives supporting the family reunification program. Kevin and Ray are both here to speak with us tonight about what Miracle Messages means to them and the incredible experiences that they've both had because of and with Miracle Messages. We will also be joined by Melina from the Giving team for a little bit, who can speak more directly to the experience of volunteering with Miracle Messages. We'll be digging deep in on tonight's theme, covering topics like the importance of a support network and the detriment of losing one, the ways that relational poverty intersects with homelessness. We'll talk about the impact of cash for folks experiencing homelessness, a topic that is often passionately debated. And Ray, who has found support through Miracle Messages programming, will share a bit about his story and experience. And we'll also talk about the impact of a buddy system and how to volunteer from home. We've got a lot to cover tonight. So let's get into it. I'm so pleased to introduce Kevin Adler, who's the founder and CEO of Miracle Messages. He's a social entrepreneur, author, and advocate. And tonight we'll learn more about his experience as founder and CEO, which, as you've now learned, is an award-winning nonprofit organization that helps people experiencing homelessness reconnect with their loved ones and with us as their neighbors. To date, Miracle Messages' global community of volunteers and referral partners have matched over 150 unhoused neighbors with volunteers for weekly phone calls and texts, facilitated over 450 family reunifications, incredible, and distributed $50,000 in direct cash transfers, something that we'll learn more about in just a little bit. Prior to his work tackling homelessness and relational poverty on the streets, Kevin co-founded 3 education technology startups in Silicon Valley, a venture studio focused on the education ecosystem, an online fundraising platform for public schools, and a College 101 online mentoring nonprofit. Kevin's work is motivated by his late mother's own work teaching at an underserved adult schools and nursing homes, and his late uncle's 30 years of living on the street with severe mental illness. Kevin believes in a future where everyone is seen as invaluable and interconnected. And if that is not enough, he is working on his second book, When We Walk By, which investigates the homelessness crisis in the United States. He was born and raised in Livermore, California, and currently resides in San Francisco. So welcome, Kevin. And also with us is Ray. Ray's a San Francisco Bay Area native that enjoys meeting new people and spending time with his daughter. With the help of Miracle Messages, he's recently transitioned into permanent housing and now resides in the Midwest. Amazing. Along with a new hometown are new goals, the most important of which is to give back the blessings that he's received by helping those who are in need or feeling alone. Thank you, Ray. So glad you're both here. I'm going to stop talking. I would love for the audience to get to know you all a bit more beyond these introductions. This is a question that I always start with, and so much of where we're at now is thanks to our own journeys. I would love for you each to tell us a little bit about what got you to where you are now. Let's start with Ray, and then we'll hear from Kevin.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ray, and I am one of those individuals that actually benefited tremendously from the support and my relationship with Kevin and my personal friend from Miracle Messages, Jen. I started in the program about 8 months ago, maybe 9. But before that, I was unhoused for about a year and a half, going through the streets of San Francisco, not knowing what to do, not having any money, and not having any support. It didn't take too long for me to understand that to get out of it, it wasn't money that I needed. It wasn't food. It was support. It was someone I can talk to help build me back up again, to gain that mental strength, to be able to think properly, to move forward, and to provide guidance. And when you're alone in the streets, that's not very easy to get. And so having someone from Miracle Messages knock on my door one day, and I kid you not, this is how it was introduced to me. Someone knocked on my door and said, "Hey, we're from this place called Miracle Messages. How would you like to have a friend call you?" A stranger call you and be your friend. So I'm looking at this person straight in the eye and thinking, you know what, this is a joke. What do you mean? But for some reason, I just said, I could use someone to talk to. And I did. My very first connection with Miracle Messages was this great college person. She was intelligent. We just didn't connect though, because of our time differences. And then I met Jen. And Jen and I have been like this since day one. I've traveled with her virtually, basically. She's now in Washington, D.C., and we talk almost every week. And she has been my lifeline. Without the connection that I've made with Jen, I can honestly tell you, I don't think I'd be in a position where I'm at today. So I'm here to share that story, and thank Kevin for everything that this whole program has done for me as well. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ray. Welcome, and we can't wait to hear more about your story. Kevin, what got you to where you are now?
Tough act to follow with Ray. He's so eloquent. Ray, I always love being on these with you. And honored, really, that we've had an impact in your life. You've had an impact in our lives too, and certainly with me getting to know you. So my story as it relates to Miracle Messages, I had an uncle who was homeless for about 30 years. He suffered from schizophrenia, lived on and off the streets of Santa Cruz. And I never knew him as a homeless man because he was just a beloved member of my family. And so it wasn't until after he passed away that I just started thinking about the people I was walking by in downtown San Francisco, to and from work and home. I just started thinking that every person I pass, that's someone's son or daughter. That's someone's brother or sister. Maybe that's some kid's beloved uncle. But what are the backstories? I didn't think of that person as someone's somebody, as our shirts now say, to remind me and everyone else, everyone is someone's somebody. So I just got curious. I have a background as a sociologist, and I don't like feeling frustrated about problems. I feel like I believe in our potential to come together, do great things. And I didn't know what to do around homelessness. I felt helpless. And so when I, feel like that, I usually just try to have conversations and listen and learn as much as I can directly. And I, for a course of a year, had 24 individuals experiencing homelessness volunteer to wear GoPro cameras around their chests and narrate their experience of what life is like on the streets. And for context on that, I was at the gravesite with my uncle, with my dad at my uncle's gravesite, and just really thinking about how little of his story I knew from the gravesite. And then I went back home and pulled out my phone and saw on social media all these status updates from everyone in the world. So I was like, why aren't we using these tools to help our unhoused neighbors? And I'm a person of faith, and there's a thing at my church called "Who is Jesus?" And you had to answer with that, some kind of art form. And the question that went on my heart was, how would Jesus use a smartphone or social media or a GoPro camera? So long story short, over the course of a year, 24 individuals experiencing homelessness wore GoPro cameras and narrated their experience of what life is like on the streets. I got that footage back, and I watched, dozens of hours of footage, and I was just overwhelmed by what I saw. And in one clip, one individual said something that really stuck with me. It was, I never realized I was homeless when I lost my housing, only when I lost my family and friends. And I was like, wow, like, is that true? Does this person have family and friends, but they want to reconnect? And so I decided 6 years ago to take a walk down Market Street in San Francisco, went up to every person I saw who was experiencing homelessness and just said, do you have any family or friends you'd like to reconnect with? And the first person I met, this guy, Jeffrey, said he hadn't seen his family in over 22 years. I sat down with him and I recorded a video of him to his niece and his nephew and his sister and his dad. And I went home, ended up finding a Facebook group connected to his hometown, posted the video there, and within 1 hour, the video was shared over 100 times, made the local news that night. Classmates started commenting, hey, I went to high school with Jeffrey. I work in construction. Does he need a job? I work at the congressman's office. Does he need health care? And in the first 20 minutes of the post, his sister got tagged. We got on the phone the next day, and she told me that Jeffrey had been a missing person for 12 years. Broad daylight, downtown San Francisco, a few days before Christmas. So that led me to leave my job in the education space, education tech, and start doing this work full time, because I knew Jeffrey wasn't the only one and that this shouldn't be happening. And 6.5 years later, we've now reunited about 500 people experiencing homelessness with their loved ones. We have a team of 6 individuals on our team, Madeline, Mark, are here. Rena, one of our interns. We have a phone-based buddy system because we know sometimes family is part of the problem, not part of the solution. And that relational poverty being a form of poverty means that it can't just be family, but you need that relational poverty need met. So we have the phone-based buddy system. That's how Ray and Jen got connected for weekly phone calls and text messages. And then most recently, the direct cash transfer, where we give out $500 a month to an initial cohort of 15 unhoused neighbors. So happy to share more in depth, but, you know, at a high level, we just believe that, you know, homelessness is obviously a huge problem in all of our cities. All of us feel it. You don't need to tell us. But I think we have to remember that even when we're focused on solving homelessness, we need to remember that our unhoused neighbors are not problems to be solved. They're people to be loved. And that's really at the heart of our work around addressing relational poverty at Miracle Messages. So.
Thank you, Kevin. And I would like to dig a little bit deeper into relational poverty since it's such a big part of the theme. And it's such a poignant term. It really offers so much insight into the reality that so many do face when they experience what we talk about as homelessness. And as part of that conversation, I also want to talk about different usage of terms. There's often debate around how to best speak about this experience that we know as homelessness. There's houselessness or being unhoused or homelessness. And I think that the debate often tends to be wonderfully based in the idea of dignity and ensuring that the way that we're speaking about this experience feels like it's representative of what that person might be actually experiencing. And I think that it often centers around the idea that a home is not just a structure, but it's representative of the community we're surrounded by, either the family we're born into or the family that we choose. And, you know, again, I know that a blanket term will never capture the experience of everyone, and it would do a disservice to the uniqueness of an individual situation. But when I think about homelessness, I consider the fact that the lack of support system and supportive community often is at the root of the situation. And, you know, you've given us a bit of insight into that so far. And I want to even reiterate that quote. I never realized I was homeless when I lost my housing, only when I lost my family and friends, because I think that is just so gripping and helps us to better understand how someone might find themselves in a situation of experiencing homelessness. So will you talk to us just a little bit more about the different factors that may contribute to relational poverty to help impart a bit more broader thinking around the empathy and compassion that we can have as it relates to some of these root causes? Ray, do you want to start us off with this question, and then we'll hear from Kevin?
Actually, I'm going to hit it directly, okay, right on, because I guess that's the best way to do it. But I, just like the person who said that he didn't realize he was homeless until he realized he didn't have family or friends, the way I would define that situation is really you're unhoused and you're unloved. That's how the person felt. And when you feel unloved, you just don't have the ability to feel like you can reach out to anyone or even leave yourself open to take in anyone into your life. And that makes it difficult to live on the streets. So that's the best way I can describe you being someone being really homeless. You're unhoused and you're just unloved. And you feel that way, even though that may not be the case. It's just that feeling you're left with. And it's a strong emotion that just stops you from taking that next step forward to make your life better. And so to have someone reach out to you and offer that love is the first step to getting out of it. And that's the bottom line. I never realized until I was unhoused for a few months that it wasn't money I needed to get out of it. It wasn't companionship that I needed on the street to get out of it. It was someone that I can actually feel like they love me enough to listen, and they love me enough to offer support. They love me enough to give advice that would actually help me take that next step forward. And then on my end, be open enough to allow that person to help me make those changes. So it wasn't money, it was that person. And Jen was that person. Kevin was that person. And so that's the bottom line from my end at least.
Yeah. Well, Ray said it well. I would say we're having a huge crisis in the U.S., obviously around housing, around affordability, and we're aware of that. But what we're not seeing is just the relational poverty and how rampant it is. For homelessness in the Bay Area, where I'm most familiar, it's estimated that 1 out of every 3 people who becomes homeless is as a result of some kind of relational brokenness. And that could be a death in the family, a divorce, a separation, the loss of a loved one, having a fight, getting kicked out, a breakup, domestic violence situation. So whatever the context may be, that falling out and that breakdown, or perhaps in many cases, the family and the friends may not have many resources to begin with that dissimilar from what that person has. And without that relational piece, even if you do get into housing or get some other services, it's really hard to stay housed and stay stable if you don't have that community layer undergirding it. And just a few statistics, because I know there's some data nerds on this call, I can just feel it. So in the United States, 1 out of every 2 Americans is a paycheck away from not being able to pay rent. 40% of people in the United States say they don't know where they'd get $400 to pay for an emergency expense. And this is all pre-pandemic data, so I'm sure it's only worse. And you look at numbers like that, 1 out of 3 people, 1 out of 2 people, a paycheck away, 40% of people not knowing where they get $400. And you almost have to ask, why aren't there more people experiencing homelessness? What's keeping tens of millions of people from falling over the edge into homelessness? And what we found is it's family and friends, social support, church, synagogue, civic groups, informal economy, it's community. And we're seeing in San Francisco, if you look at the data from the city, 60% of people who exit the shelter system successfully, 60%, it's as a result of family or friend reunification. So it's this incredibly effective tool in addition to everything else, because it's not a silver bullet. There is no silver bullet. You need housing, you need mental, emotional support, you need, if you need recovery, rehab, whatever it happens to be. But it's this neglected tool because in some ways it's the hardest thing. It means we have to be in a relationship with each other. We have to get to know a person at a level beyond the base of Maslow's pyramid: food, water, shelter, clothing, housing. We need to get to know them as a human being. And as long as we see people experiencing homelessness as defined by their homelessness, we would never look at each other as housed people, because we know that's ridiculous. We're not a monolith. It's not, I'm not a housed person by identity, Ray, but now we have housing. And yet that's exactly what we do for people who are lacking stable housing. It's a monolithic group. We have to get to know the person behind the housing instability and get to know what they need and kind of walk the journey with them. So,
Kevin, if I can add to that, Kevin said that putting an unhoused person in a home doesn't solve the problem is absolutely true. It requires more than that. And from my experience, the pandemic actually provided me with a room. I was part of the program where I was housed in a temporary hotel room for a few months. But I tell you guys, the first 2 months I was in that hotel room, I still felt unhoused. I still felt homeless. I still felt alone. I still felt like I had nowhere to go. I still felt hopeless. It wasn't until I connected with Jen that I started to feel differently. And it was a progress. It was a process. But absolutely true. You can't take someone off the streets, stick them in a room or stick them in a house and say you're solved, you're fixed. Now it's up to you to move forward, because that's not possible.
Thank you for reiterating that, Ray. It is so true. And we'll talk a little bit more about what some of the other factors are that can help to support a person in taking those next steps. But first, since you mentioned the housing as a result of COVID, I'd just love to ask, has for a lot of folks that we've spoken to, there have been some silver linings that have come out of this experience. In some cases, a stronger sense of empathy and a more connection to one another. Do you sense that this experience has led to other positive learnings or takeaways that have happened as a result of a challenging year and a half?
Gosh, Kelly, one of the biggest positives I can share with you all is meeting people like Kevin and Jen. I didn't know such people existed, to be honest with you. Feeling hopeless is it's hard to not make it feel like it's going to be a permanent emotion or feeling that you'll have, especially out in the streets. And it's very easy to give up. Putting a roof over someone's head, it doesn't change it. So biggest benefit I felt was Jen. Jen, I love her to death. And just to share a little bit about my relationship with her, we started off with a 45-minute conversation. And somewhere along the line, we realized we had a lot more stuff in common. One of the biggest things that I wanted to get back to was a relationship with my daughter, which I lost during my time on the streets. And during our conversation, I kept mentioning that to Jen, and I mentioned the school she was going to, and Jen said, "Oh my God, it's her in this school?" And Jen all of a sudden says, "She was just in my classroom the other day. I love her. She plays with my dog. I'm her campus ministry instructor. We see each other almost every day." And so that connection in itself just really, talk about getting sent an angel. So that just fixed one of the biggest things that I wanted to establish. One of the key things that actually allowed me to say, you know what, I'm going to get better and I'm going to get out of this and move forward. So really I have a better sense now of how to let people in my life because of Jen, because of Kevin, how to share more. Believe me, we wouldn't have been having this conversation 4 years ago because I would not have shared this with anyone. But having met Jen, having lived a life with these two, Jen and Kevin, it's been easy to share that because I want other people to get something out of it. Don't close yourself up to love. Don't. If you want to dig a hole for yourself, that's how you do it. So don't close yourself up to love. That's the first step to fixing your problems. If you are unhoused, unloved, or feel alone, biggest positive.
It's beautiful, right? One of my happiest days at work in nearly 7 years of doing this was the day that Jen texted me the photo of you two sitting together at your daughter's high school graduation. And I know how much that meant to you. And I'll tell you, it meant a lot to me to have that photo and to see that big smile behind the mask. I could see it in your eyes. You were smiling. So, Kelly, the only thing I'd add around as it relates to the pandemic is I heard very early one of our unhoused neighbors say something that I thought was pretty, stopped me in my tracks. It was, you don't need to teach me about social distancing. That's my life already. And when I heard that, I just was like, wow. Not only is that so sad to hear that, but also what a reminder that this period of time, and we all experience things differently in the pandemic, different racial groups, ethnic groups, different health levels and status, different employment and lack of employment in industries. This was not the same pandemic for everyone, and a lot of people really were hurting in a way that many of us maybe on this call were not, but I'm sure some of us were and are still. But I'd say that what an opportunity to go through a period of like social distancing, knowing that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, knowing that it's a relatively temporary start and stop period, and then return and say, okay, there are still people in our society, in our neighborhoods, who are socially distanced and they can't get out of it. And there's things I'm doing every day that could either reinforce that distance or that could bridge that distance. And at Miracle Messages, and I think this pandemic presents an opportunity, as we've seen with our volunteers. They're like, okay, I've had a taste of this. It's not the same as being homeless. It's not the same, but I felt lonely. I felt isolated. I felt a little depressed. I felt a little bit unloved, and I didn't feel like I belonged. I think that hook of shared vulnerability gives us a type of empathy that we can now say, well, now what am I going to do with that? Because I need to connect with people who that's their daily reality.
Yes, that is such a good reminder. And I'm thinking about in the early days of the pandemic, when New York City was totally on lockdown and we just really weren't seeing one another. And I lived by myself, and I was able to volunteer more in person with some of our partners that were doing street outreach. And, I was just thinking so much more about how much I looked forward to that time that I would get to spend with these friends that I could count on seeing every week. And I think we were I was getting so much out of these interactions. I was meant to be going to help out, but it was giving me so much just to be able to connect, and even, like you said, have just a glimpse of that understanding of that feeling of being so solitary and alone, sort of. And I think it was a sharp reminder of just how that is such a reality for so many, even though we know, like you said, it's to really feel it. And I think I and some of our team members have really close relationships with some of our homeless neighbors in New York, and we've come to know them well. And texting has been an incredible way to keep in touch. And we see the impact of that kind of regular check-in and sharing that they know someone's thinking of them and is there for them to help get them out of their head at the moment, or get me out of my head for a moment, to share jokes and memes and cat videos, and it's something that we rely upon. And I text them as much as any other friend or family member. And I would love just for you both to talk a little bit more about Miracle Friends and how it's worked for you all, and how someone could get involved.
Oh, I guess I'll
start. Ray?
Yeah, as I mentioned, my Miracle Friend, her name is Jen, and I love her to death. I tell you, when we first connected, I was in a position where I was in a room, and I didn't know what to do next. Honestly, I would wake up in the morning, know that I would go back to sleep at night next. Yes, I felt blessed. I had a roof under my head. I felt blessed that I wasn't outside in the cold, but that's not the way you want to live. And so I didn't have friends that I felt comfortable I could reach out to. I felt ashamed. I didn't have family I felt comfortable that I could share with. And to have someone like her open herself up to me and allow me to share the kind of information I really didn't want to share with anyone. And that took a little bit of time, but believe it or not, it didn't take as long a time as I thought it would. She became my best friend in just a short amount of time. So, and the miracle really is that she helped me at that point fill in the blank throughout my day. And I call it a miracle because, God, you guys don't understand how hard it is to think about what to do next when you're feeling alone. Really, yes, you're fed, you're full, go to sleep. That's it. And that's not life. So Jen allowed me to think about what to do next during the pandemic, when a lot of people were having a hard time dealing with staying home or not working or things like that. She gave me the strength and the mental capacity to think about looking for a job. And during the pandemic, I went out to go look for a job. I worked with the COVID testing sites. I worked in the COVID vaccination sites for a long period of time, and that allowed me to get my foot in the door, or back in the door, working again. And every day she checked up on me. Ray, how was your bus ride? Ray, how was your bus walk back home? Are you feeling okay? Why aren't you texting me back right away? Things like that. So, and to have someone to respond to and tell and talk to you about your day, about your challenges, about anything on your mind, and have that person respond back with the kind of words that'll allow you to say, you know what, I did this the wrong way. Let me do that instead. Things like that. Yeah, I have a heart condition where I can't walk very far without losing my breath. And at the time, I was really having a hard time getting to work. And Jen suggested I go back to the hospital, go see a doctor, take some time off and do that. I would have never thought of that. I would have just kept going until. But so that's my miracle in life. Jen is she's really more than a friend now. She's become a partner in what I do every day. And yeah, so I'm thankful for that.
Ray, I can really relate to the feeling of why aren't you texting me back with some of my friends that I stay connected with when I'm worried about what might be going on, or I think that they're walking home from work and they haven't written me back yet. So I can really appreciate that. Kevin, what do you think?
Well, I think, Ray said it as well as any of us could. I'll put in the chat. I know we'll do call to action later and ways to get involved, but I just want to take this as a moment to put in the chat. If you go to miraclefriends.org, we have a need right now. We have more unhoused neighbors than we do volunteers for Miracle Friends. And we are very much looking, unfortunately, with the pandemic kind of, tapering off, there's been less enthusiasm and interest from housed volunteers to get involved. So if anyone who's listening in on your heart, it's 1 hour a week. It's a minimum of 3 months. You get your own phone number if you don't want to use your personal device on your handset, and it's just once a week phone call and text message with an unhoused neighbor, and we'll match you based on whatever criteria. So I know Madeline is our director of operations is there smiling because she's been trying to recruit for more volunteers, and we really need all of the help we can get. So I put that in the chat if anyone wants to take a minute. It's 5 minutes. You could do it while I'm talking or before the end of this. But what I'd say is I have had the opportunity to actually volunteer now through Miracle Friends. I've been wanting to for a while. For a while, it was more unhoused neighbors than volunteers. Since it's changed, I said, okay, now's the time to do it. And I have a terrific friend named Robert. And Robert is someone who I'm never going to have a relationship with Robert as it sounds like Ray and Jen have. He has been through some fairly serious traumas, and having a conversation, every conversation begins by him reiterating some of those traumas that he's faced. And at first I felt very unsure of what to say or how to respond. I'm used to, and I think probably a lot of us are, wanting to fix problems, solve, here's the answer. But I've really just tried to listen. And what happens, it's really interesting, is it's the same thing every time. We get on the call and he starts telling me about, the elder abuse that he faced and how his sister did this and his family, and he's, trying to get a lawyer. And I just, I listen and I sit with him. And then it's just, and then from there, he just starts saying, how are you doing? And we have this just vivacious, bright conversation. And I want to never look past the traumas. And if he wants to go deeper, be there. But I realized that, if I didn't take the time to just be present, we would never have the opportunity to go deeper, And oh my gosh, this guy is one of the most interesting human beings I have ever met. He was a whitewater rafting river guide. He was like a snake charmer in Texas, in Big Bend, worked on a farm. He has story after story that's fascinating. And I love that he's a surly guy, which is perfect because, I try to be nice and all, but I come from a family of surly people, so I can be surly too. And, we get on the phone and sometimes he'll say, now's not a good time. I don't want to talk right now. And I'm just like, great. Thank you for telling me. And if you don't want to talk to me next time, just tell me. Just say, hey, I don't want to talk to you right now. I'm busy. I'm about to eat dinner. It's chicken night. I don't want to talk to you. And I'm like, totally understandable. So, and what's been really touching for me is in moments where I don't even know if I'm reaching him, maybe he just is kind of spouting off. At the end of the call, he'll say something like, it's been nice talking to you, Kevin. And having him just say my name and know who I am and have enough of a connection it means a lot to me. And I hope it means a lot to him that I'm listening in and having conversations with him. But we're getting to know each other. It's early on. Every relationship's different. But I feel like if there's any ghostwriters on this call who want to write some fascinating biography of someone, I've got a perfect person for you and Robert. So.
Thank you for sharing, and I'm so glad you shared the call for folks to get involved too, and we'll spread that message as well. I want to make sure we get to Melina and talk a little bit about the volunteering that she and some of the Bombas team members have been doing. But before we get to that, I just want to talk about Miracle Money, which is another component of the Miracle Messages organization. And, you know, I think universal basic income is something that's been popularized in the last few years. And often the idea of offering money to someone experiencing homelessness is hotly debated. I mean, I'm personally in the camp of offering the specific thing that someone is asking for, as long as I'm able to, trusting that the person asking knows what they need and appreciating my ability to honor that dignity of choice and practical use. But I know that not everyone feels that way. And so I'm just curious to know, has there been, well, one, please tell us a little bit about Miracle Money, and also has there been any pushback or challenges that you've had to face as a result of this sort of mentality that money shouldn't be something that's offered?
Sure, I'll start on that. And Ray, if you have thoughts, we'd love to hear them. You know, for us, relationships come before everything else. And when you're in a relationship with people, you care, you listen, you hear what needs they have, and then you trust them. You trust each other. You want to help those needs. And so for us, it's kind of a no-brainer because we have 150 participants in Miracle Friends. We invite the volunteers, as we did in the pilot, to nominate their friends, their unhoused friends, if they think they'd be well suited to a pilot around direct cash transfers. Here's the criteria, you know, housing status, diversity, fit, timing, you know, whether the person is struggling with maybe some substance abuse issues, maybe not the right time, you know, whole list. And then from that, we had, I think, about 70 nominations come through. And then we had a committee evaluated based on those criteria and selected the initial 15 recipients, Ray being one of them. I mean, we could have easily have selected 40 or 50 of those 70 individuals as deserving. You know, I think it's important, of course, to meet our unhoused neighbors at where they're at. And if that means there's something around, you know, a substance abuse, mental health issue, perhaps it's not the right timing or other services are needed. But I'll say that the percentage of people experiencing homelessness where that is the reason for their homelessness is way overestimated and over visualized in our society. Like, you know, I'll be honest, you see Ray walking down the street, you would never think in a million years he's experiencing homelessness. You know, most of the people we serve, you'd never know. Everyone's dressed, they're us. You know, we are them. There's no separation. And so, you know, what I've seen in our direct cash transfer program, we have 15 participants. A third of those individuals have been able to get housing as a direct result of $500 a month for 6 months. I don't know how I'd find housing for double that in the Bay Area. And we have 5 of those individuals who've been able to self-solve their homelessness with $500 a month. I think as a society, we have to look in the mirror and realize that there's a level of what I'll call paternalism in a lot of our social programs, where we think we know what's best for individuals. And as a nonprofit leader, I have to ask myself, if I'm not providing value to our unhoused neighbors that is at least as effective as just giving money directly to those individuals, what business should I have taking a paycheck? What business should I have building a team? Am I just employing people? Because maybe, but you know, that's different than trying to address homelessness. So I think as long as you build in trust parameters, which by the way is the same currency of all the sharing economy apps that we use, right? You don't step into a stranger's car unless you have Uber or Lyft or whatever to tell you 4.9 out of 5. You don't go stay at someone's house unless you have Airbnb or couch surfing to say, okay, old school couch surfing. Any couch surfers out there? That's me. So I think there's just this lack of trust as a currency among our unhoused neighbors. We don't know them. We don't know their stories. We don't know. So what we're trying to do is bridge that. And once you're in relationship, it's not even a question. Of course, you give $500 to address food insecurity needs, pay down storage fees, help apply for unemployment insurance, get housing, pay for child care. These are the things that our unhoused neighbors who are receiving our direct cash transfers have used their money on. And it's been just a very positive experience. So
I can add to that, and don't take this the wrong way, guys, but if there are people out there planning on solving homelessness by just offering cash to a homeless person or an unhoused person, don't do it. Put in the time first. Put in the time. Put in the time and effort to listen, to understand, to know more about the person, to make sure that that money is really going to help them be housed in the right way. It took time for me. I mean, I don't know. I remember when Kevin first offered it to me, and my first reaction was, there's somebody else out there that needed Kevin, not because I was trying to be honorable or anything like that, but because of what Jen has put in with me. Jen spent months just helping me gain the strength and ability to find work, to be able to work every day, to save money, to get myself to a point where you're looking at the future and saying, I can do this on my own. It may take years, it may take some time, but I can do this. And so when Kevin first offered that money to me, I was already at a situation where I felt like, I'm on the road to recovery. And it's going to be a long road, but I'm going to try to do this on my own. Luckily enough for me, Kevin was kind of pushy, and he kind of pushed it upon me. But really, solving this is not about money. It's really about making sure that we provide the support necessary for the person to understand what to do with those funds, to help themselves out, because that is more important than having money in your pocket, really. And that's the solution to it all. It might not be a quick solution, but it certainly is the only solution. Understand, learn to love before you offer them.
And we've partnered with the City of San Francisco's financial literacy group. They have something called Smart Money Coaches, where every unhoused recipient of Miracle Money has had the chance to connect one-on-one with a counselor to talk about setting up a bank account, kind of budgeting, making use of those funds where they want to allocate. And then, of course, the volunteer has been super present. Some of our mentors, every volunteer in Miracle Friends is overseen by a mentor. And then we've been compiling resources around, just cliff effects. So this is getting into the weeds of UBI, but making sure a person doesn't lose benefit eligibility by receiving a gift like food stamps or SSI as a result of it. So we really try to walk with our unhoused friends. I'll just say, can you imagine? Ray, I have so much respect for you, because here's this guy going through this, probably one of the worst experiences that I could imagine. And you get connected to Jen, you're happy about that. And then we offer you $500 a month. And your first response is, isn't there someone who needs it more than I do? And that just, to me, is such a testament to your character. And, truthfully, Kelly, Ray is a very special person for sure, and is one of my favorite people. But we have every person I've had a chance to really get to know at a deeper level in our programs. They all have just extraordinary qualities about them. Some are surly and don't want to have long conversations like my miracle friend. Some are like Elizabeth, who was a teacher, an educator, a nonprofit leader, went to UCLA for undergrad. She got cancer, I think it was colon cancer, started going to chemotherapy, could no longer teach at the public school environment. It wasn't safe when she was going through chemo, and she ended up losing her apartment of 14 years and ending up on the streets for the first time in her adult life. She got matched with her friend, Joan, through the Miracle Friends program, and was also a recipient of Miracle Money. And the first thing she did with her Miracle Money, and I still can't believe she did this, she made a donation to Miracle Messages. And I asked her, why did you do this? You know, you didn't need to do this. And she said, I didn't do it for you. I did it for myself, to once again feel the dignity of being able to support the causes and the people that I believe in. And to me, like, when you hear stories like that, that's character. That's just someone you want to trust, you believe in. And so I think if we give an opportunity for our unhoused neighbors and friends to just show who they are as people, beyond the homelessness, but who they are as thinkers, workers, parents, sons, daughters, friends, and neighbors, then I think we'll meet them where they're at and want to be part of their journey.
Yes, and on that topic, I would love to get into a little bit more. I know we only have 9 minutes left, but the reunification program that has been so successful so far, and I know that we've got members of the Bombas team who have been working on it, and Melina's here. So Kevin, I'm going to ask you to ask Melina a question about the family reunification efforts so that our audience can know a little bit more about it.
Great. Well, Melina, I'm starstruck having you here because I don't often see you on video here because we're on calls every week, Wednesday evening, 5:30 Pacific time, doing digital detective work, making phone calls, writing letters, finding loved ones, delivering messages, and reuniting families. And Melina and some of her colleagues at Bombas, some of the folks on this call, have been instrumental in helping us to reconnect now nearly 500 unhoused neighbors with families. So Melina, why did you choose to get involved as a digital detective, and what's been the experience for you?
Hello, I'm Melina, the Senior Giving Associate, and Kevin, to answer your question, it was an easy decision. To no one's surprise, in 2020, the majority of our employees were separated and pretty isolated, and part of my work is connecting our employees with our mission. So when I truly learned more about Miracle Messages and what y'all do and what you needed, it just seemed like a perfect match. So knowing the situation that we were all in, we signed on to like a quick pilot time frame where we worked as digital detectives. And even though we didn't make any crazy breakthroughs that I heard so many people share, it still felt amazing to meet weekly as a team, get to meet new people, because fortunately as a company, we were growing throughout 2020 and there were so many of our peers that we didn't even know. So it was a great time to come together, meet each other, and do something very meaningful. And at the end of our pilot period, 100% of our volunteers would recommend it to a peer. We ended up going on to phase 2. We called it the phase 2 crew, where we now have double the amount of volunteers and we're just working away on cases.
Amazing. Well, so grateful for you, Melina. And, it's one thing where you already are all doing something pretty amazing, giving out the socks 1 for 1. We've benefited from thousands of socks that we distribute to our unhoused neighbors, but to just go the extra mile, volunteer as digital detectives, as Miracle Friend volunteers, it just means the world to us. And we're just really grateful for you. When you offered to have us on for a panel, we just couldn't help but say yes or jump at the shot. So.
Ray, before we move on to the next thing, is there anything you want to add about the family reunification process?
Oh, geez. Gosh, guys, there's nothing better in the world than having a family around you. And family is more than just people that you're related to by blood. I consider Jen, Kevin, those guys are my family now. So take a moment, guys. Listen, go help someone. Become their family member.
Thank you for that very important reminder. And Ray, you've accomplished so much in recent time. What's next for you? What are you excited
Oh,
about?
well, it's funny you asked that because I did I when the moment I was able to secure permanent housing here in Kansas, I kind of felt I was complete. But the moment I moved in all my stuff, I spent a week at the hospital. That's a long story. I won't mention that. But the moment I got my stuff into this home and I settled down on my first night, that feeling of being complete went away quickly. It's like, you know what, it's my turn. I'd like to do something now. So when I get my health back in order, which I plan to very quickly and very soon, I hope, I'd like to look into what I can do here in Kansas, in Topeka. Um, Work with the county agencies, maybe. See what I can do to give back some of the things that Kevin, Jen, and his people have given me. Um, I'm a salesperson by nature. I love selling. Before being unhoused, at the ring of a bell after each sale, that was my go-to thing. I could do without that now. I want to see a smile. I want to see someone actually say, you know what, I'm okay now. That's my goal.
And Ray, with your best salesman's pitch, if you're pitching to our audience, one thing that they could take away from this conversation, one thing that you'd like to ask of them to carry with them or put into action, what would that be?
Um, Please take a moment to look at people beside you when you walk the streets. Um, they're not all happy, guys. Take a moment to realize that you're in a position to do the one thing that 100% of us can do to help people that are in trouble, and that's to listen. Okay, that's to listen. So whenever you have the opportunity to open yourself up to do just that, this will be a better world.
Kevin, I'm not sure how you're going to top that, but same question for you.
Well, Ray said it best, as usual. So this right here is our hotline card, 1-800-MISS-YOU. When you call that number, it reaches an operator, usually one of us, standing by to take down information and help the person either reconnect to the loved one or get matched with a friend. And these cards, it's not enough. You have to have the conversation, as Ray's saying, you have to listen. But would love to have folks distribute these cards on our behalf in their communities. One idea, potentially having this in some Bombas donation socks. We do that with our socks where we give them out like this. But, you know, whether it's distributing the hotline card, spreading the word, would love to hear from all of you about how a program like Miracle Messages or Miracle Friends could work in your community, you know, wherever you happen to be based. And if you're interested in getting involved, you can go to our website, miraclemessages.org/get involved, and sign up either to be a digital detective or as a volunteer miracle friend and get matched with an unhoused neighbor for weekly calls and texts. But you know, whether you choose to volunteer with Miracle Messages or Miracle Friends, or really just kind of take it and sit with it, just knowing that our unhoused neighbors are not problems to be solved, they're people to be loved. And honestly, we're all that much closer to this issue, this problem, than we'd like to think. And for me, my uncle, you know, really inspired by Journey, but so did my mom. And knowing the kind of values that she represented, how she treated our neighbors, you can't have values of inclusivity and love and then look at the issue of homelessness and say we're living up to our values. And so I think finding a way to take whatever values you may have about hospitality, love, inclusivity, and saying, how can I go an extra leap and treat my unhoused neighbors not as problems to be solved, but as people to be loved, as neighbors, as friends. So.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Melina. Could keep talking about this for a lot longer. And Kevin, does your t-shirt say everyone is someone's somebody. I think that's a really great sentiment to end on too. Thank you to our audience for joining us tonight. This conversation has been recorded, so it'll be posted on our YouTube channel tomorrow in case you want to share it. And as always, we're here for questions and comments. So thank you, and hope you'll join us again next month. Kevin and Ray, my biggest thanks. You two are amazing. Thank you for sharing your stories.
Thank you, Kelly. And thank you, Melina. VIP appearance on stage.
Absolutely.
Take care, Kevin. Love you.
Have a
Bye,
great
Ray. You too.
everyone.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye.